The key no longer fit. I watched my daughter, Chloe, as she stood on the porch of the house I had built with my own hands, the house that was once ours. She tried the key again, and then again, confusion slowly souring into frustration. My son-in-law, Mark, stood beside her, his travel-worn expression shifting to one of concern. They found the note I'd left, a plain white envelope taped to the door. I watched it all unfold on the small screen in my hand, from a place they would never find me. I saw my precious Chloe tear open the envelope with trembling hands. I saw her eyes widen as she scanned the words I had written with a shattered heart. And then came the scream, a sound of disbelief, rage, and pure, unadulterated panic. It was in that moment I knew they wouldn't let this go. This was only the beginning. But the story, it all began with a phone call on a Tuesday evening. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last of the chili from my bowl. It was Arthur's recipe, my late husband's, though I could never quite capture the exact smoky flavor he achieved. I glanced at the phone and smiled. Chloe, the name of my only child, glowed on the screen. Hi, Mom. How are you? Her familiar voice, always so warm and full of care, filtered through the line. It made this old woman's heart swell with a mixture of love and loneliness. I settled back into Arthur's favorite armchair, the one where he used to read the paper every morning. I'm fine, honey. Just finished dinner. About to watch some TV. I didn't tell her it was chili I'd been reheating for 3 days. And I didn't tell her I'd spent the better part of an hour just staring at Arthur's photograph on the mantelpiece. Did you eat well? Have you figured out that food delivery app one showed you? I ate plenty, dear. Don't you worry. I replied softly. I had a little scare yesterday, though. I forgot to turn off the stove after I put the kettle on. Lucky I smelled the plastic handle melting before it got worse. The line went quiet for a moment. I could picture her frowning, the same way Arthur always did when he was deeply concerned. That little crease between her brows. She got that from her father. Mom, maybe we need to talk about getting someone to check in on you more often. Mark is worried, too. I can take care of myself. Chloe, I interjected. How was your work trip? You're in Denver, right? Yes, Mom. The conference wraps up tomorrow. Mark handled most of the client meetings, and I had to sit through a painfully boring presentation on next-gen marketing trends. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Well, I have to go. Mom, Mark and I have a dinner with an important investor. All right, sweetheart. Be safe. I love you. Love you too. Mom, take care of yourself. I heard a faint click, followed by a rustling sound. I figured she just tossed the phone into her purse. I was reaching to hang up my own receiver when I heard voices, muffled, but just loud enough to be picked up by her phone's microphone. See, Mark. She's getting more and more forgetful. It was Chloe's voice, but not the warm, concerned one from a moment ago. This one was cold, irritated. She left the stove on yesterday. What if the house burns down? My hand froze over the phone. A deep chill spread through my chest, like a block of ice lodging itself over my heart. It's time. Chloe. The assisted living community. It was Mark, my son-in-law. His voice was clinical, decisive. Your mother is becoming a liability. You know she is. Your dad was a great guy, but she can't manage on her own anymore. The word hit me like a sledgehammer. Liability. Was that what I was to my own child? This house, it's got to be worth close to $2 million by now. Chloe's voice had changed. It was the sound of cold calculation. Given the market in this neighborhood, we could probably get 2.2. Exactly. Mark replied, his tone smug. We sell the house. Put her in a nice, decent place. Nothing too expensive. And we can finally buy that property in the hill country we looked at. The one with the infinity pool and the view. And then my daughter laughed. A real, genuine laugh. "Oh, Mark, you should have seen her face just now. So happy I called. She has no idea what we're planning. The longer we wait, the more confused she'll get. We have to do this while she still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floors. Arthur and I had installed and finished ourselves 30 years ago. Every square inch of this house was built from our sweat. Every drop of it was a dream for our family's future. I sat there, in the silence of the empty house, staring at Arthur's photograph. His eyes in the picture seemed to look right at me, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it disappointment? A warning? Or perhaps just the terrible truth that only the departed can ever truly know? The grandfather clock in the hall, an anniversary gift from Arthur, ticked on steadily as darkness crept in. Outside, the cicadas began their nightly chorus in the garden he had planted and I had so carefully maintained. Something cold and hard was forming in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt hearing my daughter's voice only minutes before. My hands, worn from decades of homemaking, slowly curled into tight fists. They thought I was a liability. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded. They were already spending my money, planning their new life on the foundations of my memories. But I wasn't dead, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Arthur's face watched me from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different, as if the very walls had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath with me. My legs trembled when I finally stood to turn on a light. The soft glow illuminated the living room we had furnished piece by piece, each item chosen with care, saved for with difficulty. The burgundy sofa where Chloe used to curl up and do her homework. The coffee table Arthur had built in the garage, sanding it smooth while a tiny Chloe ran around his feet. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept old receipts and documents. My fingers found the file I was looking for without conscious thought. 20 years of financial records I never threw away. Because Arthur always said, "You never know when you'll need these things, Eleanor." The tuition receipts for Chloe's 4 years at the University of Texas. I remembered Arthur working double shifts back then, coming home with drywall dust in his hair and grout under his fingernails. I'd have coffee waiting and I'd rub his aching shoulders while he sat at this very kitchen table, calculating expenses. "You're working yourself to death," I told him one night, watching him figure out how to cover her next semester. "She has to have a better life than we did, Eleanor. She's smart enough to be anything." He'd kiss the top of my head. "But don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened to him. God, I should have listened. The receipt for her wedding was in there, too. Nearly $50,000 for one day. I had told Chloe we could only afford 15, maybe 20,000. But she had cried, real tears, saying she wanted her dream wedding. Arthur had to take on side jobs, installing flooring for a contractor friend on weekends for 6 solid months. "You're the best daddy in the world," Chloe had whispered in my ear during her father-daughter dance, her head resting on his shoulder, her expensive dress rustling against his rented tuxedo. I'll never forget this day. But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed for her first car loan when her credit wasn't good enough. Just like she'd forgotten who called in a favor to get her that marketing job after she'd been unemployed for 8 months out of college. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago, after Mark lost his job as a financial consultant for reasons they never fully explained. They moved in with me, just until Mark gets back on his feet. I never charged them rent. I paid the inflated utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of 1 old widow. Mark would clap me on the shoulder and call me the best mother-in-law in Austin. Chloe would hug me and say, "We'll pay you back, Mom, as soon as we're stable." They'd been stable for over a year. Both had good jobs, making more money combined than I ever had in my life. But they never spoke of moving out. They never spoke of paying me back. The dinner for their anniversary last month, $300 at a fancy downtown steakhouse because Mark said, "We deserve to celebrate." The car repair when the transmission on Mark's BMW went out, $4,000 that drained my emergency fund. She's like my own mother. Mark had told his friends at our last backyard barbecue, his arms slung around my shoulders. I really hit the jackpot marrying into this family. I had been proud, genuinely proud to be the generous mother-in-law, the one who held the family together, no matter the cost. I went upstairs, into the bedroom Arthur and I had shared, a room that had remained unchanged in the 2 years since his passing. My jewelry box sat on the dresser. His reading glasses were still folded beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our most important documents and pulled out the original deed to the house. Eleanor and Arthur Thompson. Purchase 1993. No liens. No cosigners. No complications. No. Just my name. Since Arthur passed. Standing there. In the room where Arthur had lived his final days. Surrounded by everything we had built. I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there. Sharp as glass shards. But underneath it, something harder was taking shape. They wanted to ship me off and sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their scraps of attention to fight back. I looked at Arthur's picture on the nightstand, remembering his voice from years ago. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. Well, Arthur. She forgot. But she was about to get a lesson that this old woman wasn't nearly as helpless as she thought. I walked into Arthur's study and pulled a business card from the desk drawer. One I had kept for 3 years. Davison and Associates. Legal counsel. Arthur had insisted we see him before he passed, just to make sure everything was in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning, I walked through my house like a stranger, like someone seeing it for the very first time. But instead of seeing a home, I saw what Chloe and Mark saw. Square footage. Market value. An asset to be liquidated. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the granite countertops Arthur had installed himself, working late at night after his day job because we couldn't afford a contractor. I had picked the Stonia speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning sun. I had made coffee on this counter every morning for nearly 30 years, until the day Arthur died. I remembered one morning, Chloe, then 3, taking her first wobbly steps from the refrigerator into Arthur's waiting arms. We both cried with joy. Arthur scooping up our little girl and spinning her around while I scrambled for the camera. She walked. In our house. He had whispered to me, tears on his cheeks. In the house we built for her. The living room held the memories of dozens of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Chloe's face light up at the sight of the enormous dollhouse. Arthur had spent 3 months building it in the garage, working in secret after she went to bed. I had sewn the tiny curtains for the windows, made miniature furniture from cardboard and scraps of fabric. "Mommy, it looks just like our house." Chloe had cried with delight. And it did. Arthur had made it a perfect replica, down to the little arched window in what was her bedroom. That arched window. It had cost Arthur 6 months of overtime. I'd seen it in a magazine and fallen in love, dreaming of a reading nook for the afternoons. Arthur had to learn how to cut wood at angles he'd never attempted before, measuring and remeasuring until his back ached. "We can't afford this, honey," I had said, worried, as I watched him mark up the wall. "But you want it, so you'll have it," he told me. "I'll figure it out." I walked up the stairs to Chloe's old bedroom, still painted the soft yellow she had chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with pictures of high school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked her as a colicky baby, the room where Arthur and I had helped her with her math homework at the small white desk he'd built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Arthur's side of the bed still had a glass of water on the nightstand, his bookmark still resting on page 247 of a novel He would never finish. I opened the closet he had built with his own hands, designed to his exact height. His clothes still hung there, a faint scent of his cologne still clinging to them. This was the room where we planned our future, where we whispered our dreams for Chloe, where Arthur had passed peacefully as I held his hand. Promise me, Eleanor, don't let anyone take advantage of you, he had said near the end, his voice barely a whisper. You're too kind, too generous. Promise me you'll look after yourself. I had promised, but I hadn't kept it. Had I? In Arthur's study, I found the file of construction photos I'd saved. A picture of Arthur, decades younger and stronger, laying the foundation in the spring of '93. A picture of him and the crew framing the house. A picture of me in a hard hat, bringing them lemonade on a hot summer day. My stomach just beginning to show with Chloe. The financial records from those years told a story the photos couldn't. A second mortgage. A personal loan from my brother. Me going back to work part-time as a school aide to help pay for materials. We ate scrambled eggs for dinner for months. Drove a car that was barely holding together. But we built this house. With our sweat. Our sacrifice. Our love for each other and for the family we were creating. And now my daughter. The baby who took her first steps in that kitchen. The child who played in the yard Arthur landscaped by hand. Wanted to sell it all and put me away like a piece of inconvenient furniture. I picked up Mr. Davison's business card from the desk drawer. The edges were soft from the number of times I'd looked at it over the past 3 years. But the phone number was still clear. Chloe and Mark thought they were dealing with a confused old woman. Someone so grateful for their scraps of attention she'd just roll over. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I dialed Mr. Davison's number, my finger steady as a rock. Outside, the morning was bright and clear. A day Arthur would have loved. A day for new beginnings. Mr. Davison's law office was on the second floor of an old brick building in a quieter part of Austin. The kind of place that specialized in helping real people with real problems rather than impressing corporate clients. I had chosen my best silk dress. A dark gray one Arthur had bought me for his own funeral. And I arrived 15 minutes early for my appointment. My hand trembled slightly as I signed in at the front desk. Mr. Davison looked older than I remembered. Perhaps in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and the patient demeanor of a man who had heard every kind of family horror story imaginable. His office was lined with law books and family photos: a wife, 2 grown kids, a golden retriever, the picture of the normal life Arthur and I had striven to build. Mrs. Thompson, it's good to see you again, he said, pouring coffee from a small machine in the corner. The rich aroma filling the room. I remember you and Arthur from years ago. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said, accepting the cup, surprised at how steady my own voice sounded. I'm here to discuss a delicate matter concerning my daughter and son-in-law. He sat behind his desk, pen poised. I'm listening. I told him everything. The phone call. The overheard conversation. Their plan to sell my home and put me in a facility. His expression never changed, though I caught the slightest shake of his head when I recounted their eagerness to spend my money on their hill country dream house. It's a shame, Mrs. Thompson. This happens more often than you would think, he said, setting down his pen and leaning back. Children often think they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when a high-value asset is involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? Legally, I mean. Let's start with the basics. The deed to the house is in your name alone since your husband's passing, correct? That's right. It was in both our names, but when he died, transferred to me automatically. Then legally, Mrs. Thompson, your daughter and son-in-law have zero claim to your property. They cannot sell it. They cannot force you into a care facility. and they cannot make any decisions regarding your assets without your explicit, sound-minded consent. He pulled a legal pad from a drawer and started making notes. The house is yours. Period. A wave of relief washed over me, followed immediately by a sharper, harder feeling. And, if I wanted to sell the house myself? You could list it tomorrow if you wanted. It's your asset. Your decision. He looked up from his notes. If you don't mind me asking, why are you considering that? I thought of Chloe's laugh as she called me a liability, of Mark's cold calculation of my worth, of 30 years of sacrifice being reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like an asset. My hands tightened on the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them just how sharp my mind still is. Mr. Davison was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. The real estate market in Austin is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Homes are selling in days, often for cash and over the asking price. He paused. If you were serious about a quick sale before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, how fast are we talking? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for a property exactly like yours, could potentially close in a week. Maybe less. He leaned forward. But Mrs. Thompson, this is a monumental decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my husband, with our own hands, Mr. Davison. Every tile, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next hour discussing the details. Market appraisals, networks of cash buyers, legal requirements. He explained he could have everything ready to go within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. My consultation fee is $200. He said as I prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that will be rolled into the legal fees for the sale. Paid in cash. My head clearer than it had been in months. As I walked to the taxi in the afternoon sun, I felt my phone vibrate in my purse. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. And for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some fancy hotel lobby in Denver, probably checking her watch, wondering why her dear old mother wasn't picking up. Let her wonder. Let her and Mark make their plans for my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone was still ringing as I stepped into the cab. Mr. Davison's card safe in my wallet. A plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from scratch once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing. But I knew she would call back. She always called when she wanted something from her old mother. But this time, she was going to get more than she ever bargained for. By the time I got home, the trembling in my hands had been replaced by a resolute calm. Mr. Davison's words echoed in my head. It's your asset. Your decision. The fog of doubt and hesitation that had clouded the last few years lifted. I was unlocking the front door when my phone rang again. I glanced through the window and saw it vibrating on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. And for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. Let her stew for a bit. Let her wonder why her dear old mom wasn't rushing to the phone. I poured a glass of water, took a deep, centering breath, and finally answered on the 6th ring. Mom, there you are. Chloe's voice was unnaturally bright with feigned enthusiasm. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer. Sorry, dear. I was out running an errand, I said, keeping my tone as warm and grandmotherly as I could muster. How is Denver? Oh, these conferences are such a bore. But listen, I have the best news. She paused for dramatic effect. Mark and I are planning a very special surprise for you. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. Oh, what is it, dear? We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve a break after everything you've been through since Dad passed. Her voice was thick with the false sympathy I now recognized as deceit. We found this beautiful place. It's like a resort. Really. But it has nurses on staff. Just in case you need anything. A resort with nurses. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. That sounds wonderful. Honey, you shouldn't go to all that trouble for me. Of course we should. Mom, we're family. Mark's voice cut in on the line. He must have been on speaker. We've got it all taken care of. And, when would this be? I managed to ask, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they could come back and claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back in Austin by next Friday. Chloe said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and your personal things. You know, the essentials. The essentials. Not the photo albums I had lovingly curated. Not the furniture Arthur had built by hand. Just the essentials for an old woman being shipped off to die. Actually, I have a surprise for you, too, for when you get back. You do. Mom, what is it? She sounded genuinely delighted, probably assuming I had signed some papers or made things easier for them. I walked to the arched window Arthur had built for me and looked out at the garden he planted, the porch swing where we had sat and talked about our future countless times. It's something I've been working on since we last spoke. I think you'll be very surprised. You're the sweetest. Mom, we'll talk all about it when we get home. You just rest up. We'll handle everything else. Sweet. She called me sweet while she was planning to steal my life. Of course. Dear. I love you. Love you too. Mom. See you Friday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with a hand that was steadier than it had been in weeks. I walked into Arthur's study and opened his laptop. The screen glowed to life, filled with possibilities I had never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for only a moment before I typed. Top Austin Realtor Quick Sale. The results filled the screen. An arsenal for a war I was finally ready to fight. I had always been meticulous. Decades as a teacher had taught me to research thoroughly before making a decision. Tonight, that meticulous nature was being put to a different use. I clicked through realtors' profiles, comparing success rates and testimonials the way I used to compare textbooks for my students. Terrytown, Clarksville, Hyde Park neighborhoods where houses sold for prices Chloe and Mark were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing at the top of the search results. Vince Carter. Age 43. Quick sales specialist. 18-day average from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes. The look of a man who made things happen fast. His testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Vince sold our house in 6 days. Found a cash buyer in 48 hours. Smooth closing. No complications. I stared at the cell phone number listed prominently under his credentials. This was it. The moment that would set everything in motion. The second I made this call, there would be no going back to the sweet, manageable old mother my daughter expected. Arthur's picture on my desk seemed to be watching. I could almost hear his voice. You sure about this, Eleanor? I was sure. More sure of anything since his funeral. I dialed Vince's number with a steady finger. Vince Carter. Carter Realty. How can I help you? Mr. Carter. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm interested in selling my home. And I need to do it very quickly. I was wondering just how fast something like that could happen. Well, Mrs. Thompson, that depends on a number of factors. But with the right property and a good pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with a cash buyer. What kind of timeline were you thinking? 10 days. My heart hammered in my chest. 10 days. That was fast. You see, the Austin market is on fire right now, especially for well-maintained homes in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your property? I looked around my house, seeing it for the first time through a buyer's eyes. It's a 2-story Craftsman, about 3,000 square feet, built in '93. Hyde Park neighborhood. 3-bed, 3-bath. I've kept it up myself. My husband and I did most of the work over the years. Vince's voice immediately sharpened with interest. That sounds like exactly what several of my investor groups are looking for. Original owner. Well-maintained. Established neighborhood. That's a prime listing. Would you be interested in having me come by for an appraisal? How soon could you be here? I could be there this afternoon. If you're free. Say, 3 o'clock? I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3 o'clock would be perfect. I'll text you the address. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I had just set in motion slowly settling in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the home Arthur and I had built together, putting a price tag on our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning furiously, an old habit from when Arthur was alive. He always insisted the house be spotless for any guest. I dusted the arched window, fluffed the pillows on the sofa, made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing to welcome a guest. I was preparing for an execution. The doorbell rang at precisely 3 o'clock. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath that smelled of the lavender I kept in the linen closet, and walked to the front door. My hand shook slightly as I grasped the brass doorknob Arthur had installed himself over 2 decades ago. Behind this door waited my salvation, or my damnation. I turned the knob and opened the door to my future. Vince Carter was just as his picture suggested, professional but approachable. In his early 40s, with the easy confidence that comes from years of successful closings. He had a leather-bound portfolio and a tablet in hand, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes widened. Wow! He stopped in my foyer, his gaze traveling from the custom baseboards Arthur had installed to the original oak floors we had chosen together. Mrs. Thompson, this is exactly what I was hoping to see. I watched him take in the details, the way the afternoon sun streamed through my arched window, the seamless flow from the living room to the dining room that Arthur had achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a support beam. His admiration was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining the place, he said, pulling out his tablet and beginning to take photos. Is this the original oak flooring? Yes. My husband put it in himself in '97. He wanted something that would last. We used solid planks. I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of talking about my husband's work. Proud, despite the circumstances. And this kitchen, Vince said, pausing at the granite countertop, running a hand along the edge. Every inch of it custom. I picked the pattern. I said the gold veins reminded me of sunshine. My voice caught for a second. It took him 3 full weekends to get the measurements perfect. Vince was typing notes on his tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of a man who knows what buyers want. Mrs. Thompson, I have to be honest. In 15 years in this business, I have rarely seen a home with this level of upkeep. My husband was an engineer. He believed in doing things right the first time. It shows, he said, gesturing to the living room. May I? I nodded, following him as he admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, the way my decorating had turned our construction project into a home. This arched window, custom job, I assume. Yes. My husband built it for me. He wanted me to have a reading nook. I pictured myself sitting there with a mystery novel and afternoon tea, my reading glasses perched on my nose. Vince was measuring now, his excitement barely contained. Mrs. Thompson, I have to show you the comps. He pulled up a list on his tablet. Similar homes in this neighborhood have sold for between 1.5 and 1.8 million. My chest tightened. That was even more than Chloe and Mark had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and the custom features, I think we should list at 1.8 million. That should generate a quick sale while still maximizing the price. $1.8 million. I sank heavily into Arthur's armchair, the number spinning in my head. That much? I finally managed. Mrs. Thompson, you are sitting on a gold mine. Houses like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Vince's voice was filled with the confidence of a man who knew his business. In fact, I have an investment group that is looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-end rental properties in historic neighborhoods. They pay cash. No financing contingencies. No haggling over repairs. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Chloe and Mark would be back from Denver in 8, expecting to find their sweet, manageable mother, ready to be shipped off to a resort. And the catch. Is there a catch? Vince smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays. No appraisal contingencies that can sink a deal. They'll do their own inspection. But frankly, your home is in better shape than most new constructions I see. I looked around the living room where Chloe took her first steps, where Arthur and I had hosted birthday parties and spent quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together. And when would I have to be out? A standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting a clear title and the paperwork done. I thought of Chloe's voice on the phone, calling me sweet, as she planned to steal my life. I thought of Mark's cold calculations, reducing me to a liability to be managed. I thought of Arthur's warning that I was too kind, too trusting. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Vince's professional mask slipped for a second, revealing genuine excitement. That's a fantastic decision. Mrs. Thompson, let me make a call right now. I watched him get on the phone, heard him describe my property with the enthusiasm of a man who had just discovered buried treasure. Hyde Park, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. He ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move on this immediately. I can have a preliminary contract drawn up by morning. The sun was setting through my arched window, casting a golden glow over the room where I had just agreed to sell 30 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had long been missing. Power. 9 a.m. The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Vince was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hall, my anniversary gift from Arthur, ticked on steadily in the silence. 9 a.m. would be perfect. After Vince left with promises of contracts and closing schedules, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through my windows cast everything in gold, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was anticipation. Vince arrived the next morning with contracts, a mobile notary, and coffee for everyone. A professional efficiency I had always admired. I read every line with the meticulousness that had made me a good teacher, checking the details as if I were grading an exam. Sale price $1. 8 million. Cash purchase. Closing date 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, talked me through each signature. Very few contingencies. Mrs. Thompson. Just a title search and a final walkthrough. And you have 30 days post-closing to occupy the house if you wish. That's right, I said. The only comfort I would be taking was seeing the look on Chloe and Mark's faces when they discovered what their liability had done. I signed my name with a steady hand, and just like that, the process had begun. The first 3 days were a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began its search through decades of records. The investors sent their team a polite crew who admired Arthur's craftsmanship and found nothing to fault. Her husband really knew what he was doing. One of them said to the accompanying lawyer, thinking I was out of earshot, "This flooring, the electrical work, it's all top-notch." Days 4 through 6. I became a woman on a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable. A place where I could start over with nearly $2 million in the bank. I found a place in a quiet part of South Austin. A senior living community with a beautiful garden and an activity center, the kind of place Arthur and I had idly talked about for our retirement. I also called a storage facility, planning which of Arthur's things I would keep and which I would have to leave for the new owners. His set of hand-carved chess pieces, of course, his toolbox, the photo albums, the essentials of a life once shared. Days 7 through 9 came with a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to independence, one step closer to showing my daughter that her confused old mother was sharper than she had ever imagined. My next-door neighbor, Susan, noticed the activity, asking about the inspectors and the official-looking people. Just getting some repairs done, I told her, hating the half-truth but knowing the full story would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 8, Vince called for a final confirmation. "Everything is on track for closing tomorrow, Mrs. Thompson." The buyers were thrilled with the inspection report. "The wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to the funds immediately." That night, I packed a single suitcase with my clothes and personal effects, not because I was leaving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Arthur's picture on my dresser and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing." Friday morning arrived. Bright and clear, the kind of spring day Arthur always said was Austin at its best. I dressed carefully in my best silk blouse. Not the funeral dress, but a royal blue one he had bought me for Chloe's college graduation. The title office was a whirlwind of professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their lawyer, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Vince orchestrated the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mrs. Thompson, if you'll just sign here and here, an initial there." Each signature felt like severing a chain. The transfer of the deed, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Live Oak Street no longer belonged to Eleanor Thompson. "And here is the confirmation of your wire transfer. 1.8 million, less closing costs, has been deposited into your account." I stared at the number on the paper. More money than I had ever seen in one place. More money than Chloe and Mark could ever dream their liability would have access to. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Vince walked me to my taxi, promising to be in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. "You made the right call, Mrs. Thompson. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need." I took the taxi through the neighborhood I had known for 30 years, past the elementary school where Chloe had learned to read, past the park where Arthur and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt a sense of release. I paid the cab and stood before the house. My house, no longer mine. The front door key felt heavy in my hand. Tomorrow, I would turn it over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Chloe and Mark were due back from Denver in 3 days, expecting to find their sweet, manageable mother ready to be packed off to a resort. They were going to find an empty house instead, and a lesson they would never forget. I stepped into another cab, my phone in hand, ready to make the next call in a plan that was unfolding better than I could have ever hoped. The cab's engine idled for a moment before pulling away, but I remained where I was, staring at the house I had built with my husband, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Chloe and Mark expected to find their dear mother waiting to be put away. The front door key felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had occupancy rights for another 30 days. More than enough time to finish what I had started. I took another car to a Starbucks and sat in a corner booth, my hand steady as I dialed a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would add a few $100s to the bill, but money was no longer an object. Austin emergency lock-in key. How can I help? I need every lock in my house changed today. As soon as possible. How soon is that, ma'am? As soon as you can get here. I'm paying cash. I can be there in 2 hours. What's the address? Back at the house, I waited for the locksmith on the porch swing, watching my neighbor Susan watering her petunias. She waved. I waved back, my heart heavy with the guilt of deceiving everyone who cared about me. The locksmith, a man named Edgar, arrived in a van filled with tools and hardware. He was a man in his 50s who had seen every kind of lock-related emergency Austin had to offer. Having some security trouble, ma'am? He asked, surveying the front door. Change of ownership. Better safe than sorry. He nodded as if he'd heard it 100 times and got to work. I watched him remove the deadbolt Arthur had installed 2 decades ago. The brass knob I had picked out to match the door knocker. This is good hardware, Edgar said as he worked. Whoever installed this knew what they were doing. That was my husband. He liked things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They made a different kind of click when Edgar tested them, a sound that was sharper, more mechanical than the old ones. Here are your new keys. 3 for each door, front, back, and the side door to the garage. He handed me a ring of keys that felt alien in my palm. That'll be $600, including the emergency fee. I paid in cash from my purse, knowing there would be no financial trail linking Eleanor Thompson to this transaction. After he left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, condensing a 30-year life into what I could carry. Arthur's toolbox went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photo and the novel he was reading when he died. The bookmark still on page 247. My teaching certificates. Our important papers. My favorite cookbook with its handwritten notes in the margins. I left almost everything else behind. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums that chronicled Chloe's childhood. Arthur's clothes, still hanging in the closet. A faint scent of him still clinging to the fabric. As I packed, I called the Sagebrush Senior Apartments, explaining that I needed a furnished 1-bedroom immediately. We have a lovely unit available for immediate move-in. The manager, a woman named Janice, said, it's a month-to-month lease. If you need flexibility, I'll take it. I met Janice at the apartment complex an hour later. It was a modest but clean building, designed for seniors, with an activity center and a well-tended garden. The 1-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. We can take a cash deposit. Mrs. Thompson, when were you thinking of moving in? Tonight. Janice's eyebrows rose slightly, but she asked no questions. I signed the lease and handed over the first month's rent and security deposit, nearly $4,000, a sum that would have seemed impossible to spend so casually just 2 weeks prior. As I loaded my car in the twilight, I saw Susan watching from her window. She waved again, and I felt the weight of all the connections I was severing, all the relationships Chloe and Mark had forced my hand on. I did one last walkthrough of the empty rooms. My footsteps echoed differently now in a house that belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where I had taught Chloe to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room where we had watched her open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Arthur had drawn his last breath while I held his hand. I'm sorry, my love, I said aloud to his memory. But you would understand. You always said I was too kind. I locked the door with the new key and drove away from Live Oak Street, perhaps for the last time. My rearview mirror was filled with the image of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting as I arrived at the Sagebrush, my car filled with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to the door of my new apartment, fumbling with an unfamiliar key for an unfamiliar lock. Inside the small apartment, I set down my suitcase and immediately picked up the phone. The final stage of my plan required one more call. One more piece of the puzzle that would deliver the surprise of a lifetime to Chloe and Mark. The apartment felt like a hotel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the smell of industrial-grade carpet cleaner. I stood with the phone in my hand, Arthur's picture already on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $2 million from children who thought they were entitled to it. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. Austin Community Trust caught my eye, smaller than the national giants, with an emphasis on personal service and confidentiality. Exactly what I needed. Austin Community Trust. Private Client Services. This is David Morrison. Mr. Morrison. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit. Approximately $1.8 million. The brief silence on the other end of the line told me David was recalibrating his day. We would be absolutely delighted to have your business, Mrs. Thompson. When would be a good time for you to come in for a consultation? Monday morning. 9 o'clock. Excellent. I'll have everything ready. The weekend stretched before me like an unexplored continent. I had never lived anywhere but the house Arthur and I built together. This small apartment felt like exile. But it was a self-imposed exile. It was my choice, not theirs. Saturday morning. I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen and methodically unpacked my few belongings. Arthur's toolbox sat on a bookshelf, our wedding photo beside the bed where I would sleep alone in a space that had never known his presence. I drove to the grocery store and shopped for one-person simple meals. Nothing that required the kind of cooking Arthur had loved. Bashir, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the neighborhood. Just moved in. Starting fresh. I told him. Sunday morning. I discovered a coffee shop called The Daily Grind 3 blocks from my apartment. The barista, a young woman named Sky with purple hair, made a strong, dark roast just the way I liked it. You new around here? She observed. Not prying. Just friendly. Yes. Retired teacher. Looking for a quiet life. I said. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk their dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning Arthur and I had cherished. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Monday morning. I dressed in my best silk blouse and drove to the Austin Community Trust. David Morrison was younger than I expected. Maybe 45. With a professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. Mrs. Thompson. What brings you to the Community Trust? I've just sold my home. I want a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees. David nodded with genuine understanding. That's exactly our specialty. Tell me what you need. I explained my situation carefully. A widow. Recently sold the family home. Needing secure, accessible banking. David asked insightful questions, never prying more than was necessary for setting up the accounts. I'll need to transfer the funds from my old bank. I explained. Not a problem. We can initiate the transfer today, and the funds should be cleared by Wednesday. David prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card, and a checkbook. All standard. Given the amount, I would also recommend our premium account package for the additional security features. I signed the documents that made me an official client of Austin Community Trust, customer number 847293, with access to nearly $2 million Chloe and Mark would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange new rhythm of my life. Morning coffee at the Daily Grind, where Sky remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read the paper. Wednesday afternoon, David called with the news I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Thompson, your funds have cleared. Your account is fully active. I hung up and looked around my small apartment, where Arthur's picture watched me from the nightstand, where the simple life I was building from the rubble of my daughter's betrayal was taking shape. For the first time since Arthur died, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. Wednesday evening, I sat in my single armchair, not Arthur's rattan chair. Not the chair where I had heard Chloe's betrayal. Just a simple chair in a simple room that was all mine. I opened my laptop and typed miniature spy camera into the search bar. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that this purchase would document the final scene of my revenge. Chloe and Mark would be back on Friday, expecting to find their sweet mother ready to be managed. They were about to discover that their liability had become their biggest problem. The search results filled the screen with an array of surveillance options, from obvious security cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After half an hour of research, I found it, a tiny, wireless camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for my teacher's mind. Wi-Fi enabled with app control, motion-activated recording, a 12-hour battery life, and crystal clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream a live feed directly to my phone from anywhere with an internet connection. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying an extra $50 to guarantee its arrival on Thursday. The total cost was nearly $100, a sum that would have given me pause 2 weeks ago, but now felt like pocket change. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial component, the note that would explain everything to Chloe and Mark when they found their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, lacking the visceral hurt they had inflicted. On the third draft, I found the right tone, elegant but devastating, loving but final. I wrote it in my neat cursive, the handwriting Arthur had always complimented. To Chloe and Mark, if you are reading this, it means my plan was a complete success. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a home because I was becoming a liability. I heard you calculating how much money you would make from selling my house. The house has been sold. For $1. $8 million. Cash. That money is safe in my new bank account, where it will remain. I have moved to a place where I am appreciated, not tolerated. Do not worry about me. Worry about where you're going to live. Your belongings have been packed and are being held at Austin Secure Storage on Lamar Boulevard. You have 30 days to claim them before fees begin to accrue. I gave you everything I had for your entire lives. You repaid me by planning to put me away so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the price. Love, Mom. Thursday morning, a delivery truck arrived at my apartment with the small box containing my surveillance device. I spent an hour in the kitchen, testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably sharp, the audio clear enough to pick up a whisper. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my old house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I had never given Chloe and Mark, parking inside to avoid questions from the neighbors. My hand shook slightly as I walked to the front door with my new key. Inside, the house still smelled like home, the lavender I kept, the lemon oil I used on the wood furniture, the faint, lingering scent of 30 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my heart clench. Chloe and Mark's suitcases stood by the stairs, their mail scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence that they were using my home as their personal storage unit while planning my exile. I plugged the camera charger into an outlet near the front door, angling it perfectly to capture anyone who entered. The feed on my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of the frame until I was satisfied it would record every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room for the last time, I touched the mantel where Arthur's picture had sat for decades. The new owners would put their family photos there. make their own memories in the room Arthur and I had filled with love. It's done, my love, I whispered to his memory. Justice is served. I locked the house with the new key, tested the camera feed one last time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion sensor was activated, the battery was fully charged, and my phone was ready to alert me the second Chloe and Mark discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The time reads 6:30 p.m. On Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Chloe and Mark would return from their business trip, probably discussing their retirement home plans and spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their sweet mother had just become their worst nightmare. I woke on Friday morning with the anticipation of someone who was about to see justice served after years of quiet injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing the empty front door of my old house. 4:30 p.m. They should be arriving soon. I knew their travel patterns. Chloe would insist on leaving Denver by noon to miss the worst of the traffic, and Mark would drive precisely the speed limit. They would be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Arthur's photo on my nightstand. I hope you understand what I'm doing, my love. They left me no choice. 5:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with a motion detection alert. A black Submark's car pulled into the driveway of my old house. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the screen. Chloe got out first, stretching after the long drive. Mark emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim an inheritance. I watched them walk to the front door, Chloe fishing for her keys in her purse while Mark set down the bags. She inserted the key into the lock I had changed just yesterday. It didn't turn. Chloe frowned, examining her keychain. She tried again, jiggling the key with rising frustration. That's weird. Her voice crackled through my phone speaker. My key isn't working. Mark moved closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. Let me try the back door. I watched him disappear around the side of the house while Chloe continued to struggle with the front lock. When Mark returned 3 minutes later, his face was a dark cloud of alarm. The back is locked, and the garage remote isn't working. His voice was edged with the panic I had been hoping to hear. Chloe, someone changed these locks. What? That's impossible. Mom doesn't even know a locksmith. Mark was examining the front door more closely now, his financier's brain recognizing a problem when he saw one. These are brand new deadbolts. This isn't an accident. Chloe pulled out her phone with a trembling hand. I'm calling the house. I watched as she dialed my old landline, a number I'd had disconnected 3 days prior. After several rings, her face crumpled in confusion. No answer. Doesn't even go to voicemail. Try her cell phone. She doesn't have a cell phone. Remember, we were going to get her one for emergencies. Her voice was cracking with the first real hints of fear. Mark was checking the windows now, his earlier confidence completely gone. There. That one's unlatched. I can give you a boost. I watched my daughter, my Chloe, scramble through the kitchen window I had deliberately left unlocked, her business suit snagging on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door swung open from within. Mark entered with their suitcases, and they both froze as they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Chloe's hand shook as she took down the envelope bearing her and Mark's names in minute cursive. I leaned forward in my chair in my apartment, clutching my phone in both hands as she tore it open. Her eyes flew across my words, Mark reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, from confusion to shock, from shock to disbelief, from disbelief to horror. She sold the house. Chloe's voice rose to a near scream. How could she do this to us? Mark snatched the note from her. reading it again as if the words might change. She's vicious. The whole time. She was playing us. $1.8 million. Chloe was sobbing now, her expensive makeup running in dark streams down her cheeks. She kept it all. That was our future. Your future? Mark snapped. The mask of the doting son-in-law finally gone. This is your mother. Chloe, you were supposed to have this handled. My fault? She rounded on him. Years of pent-up resentment boiling over. You're the one who said she was becoming a liability. You're the one who pushed for the retirement home. Because she is. Look what she's done to us. Mark gestured around the room that was no longer theirs. We're homeless. Our lease on the condo is up next week. The beautiful irony was not lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they had planned to make me homeless in an assisted living facility. Call a lawyer. Chloe said desperately. There has to be something we can do. She can't just sell the house without telling us. And what are we going to pay him with? Mark's voice was dripping with contempt. In case you forgot, I've been out of work for 6 months, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments. Then get a new job. And what financial firm do you think is lining up to hire a consultant who was fired for questionable trades? I watched my daughter's face crumble as the full scope of their situation hit her. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Mark's unemployment finally out in the open. How could she be so cruel? She whispered. The same way you were cruel when you called her a liability and planned to have her put away. Mark shot back. Your mother. She's smarter than both of us. Through the screen of my phone, I watched them sink onto my old furniture. Furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Chloe buried her face in her hands while Mark stared at my note with the look of a man who finally understood he had been completely outplayed. I switched off the camera feed. I had seen enough. I walked to my small kitchen and opened the bottle of Arthur's favorite wine I had brought from the Hausia 2018 Bordeaux we had been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured a glass and raised it to Arthur's picture. To you, my love. Justice is served. The wine tasted like victory, but it was a bitter victory. They were learning what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Chloe. No doubt. Trying a new way to reach me. I deleted it without reading and then turned the phone off completely. I walked to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline, painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere in this city, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my old home, they were learning that their liability had become their biggest problem. For the first time in the 2 years since Arthur died, I felt completely and utterly free. I was nobody's liability. I was my own woman again. With my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching out before me like an open road. Eleanor Thompson had left the building, and she was never going back. The days that followed fell into a new, quiet rhythm. Each morning, I woke in the apartment without the sound of Arthur's footsteps, without the echo of a young Chloe's laughter in the halls. There was just silence. But it wasn't a lonely silence. It was peaceful. I started my days with a walk to the daily grind, which had become a fixture in my routine. Hot Americano. No sugar. The usual. Sky, the purple-haired barista, would greet me with a smile. The usual. I'd reply. I became a regular. And Sky became a familiar, friendly face in my new life. We'd chat about small things, the weather, a story on the news, the book I was reading. It was simple conversation, free of expectation or pretense, something I realized I had been craving for a long time. I'd spend hours by the window, watching life unfold on the street below. I wasn't looking for anyone, wasn't waiting for anything. I was simply learning to be present, to enjoy the simple pleasure of a hot cup of coffee and the morning sun on my face. One afternoon, while organizing my closet, I found an old sweater of Arthur's his favorite one for cool evenings. I held it to my face, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of him. Tears came unbidden, not of sadness, but of a love that endured, of memories that no one could take from me. I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, a reminder of the man who had built my world, and who would have understood what I had to do. I started exploring my new neighborhood more, discovering a small park where other seniors gathered to chat and practice Tai Chi in the mornings. First, I just watched from a distance, unsure how to join in. But one day, an older woman named Sarah approached me. "Just enjoying the morning?" she asked with a warm, genuine smile. "Yes, I'm new to the area." "Well, come join us. Motion is lotion for these old bones." And so I joined Sarah's Tai Chi group. The slow, deliberate movements calmed my mind. I made new friends, heard their life stories, and shared a version of my own. A retired teacher, I told them, who sold her big family house to downsize. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. No one pried, no one judged. They accepted me as I was. Eleanor, their new neighbor. A week after my departure, Vint, the realtor, called. "Mrs. Thompson, the new owners are all moved in. They wanted to thank you for the wonderful condition of the house. They were wondering what you'd like them to do with the remaining furniture." My heart clenched, thinking of Arthur's furniture, his bookshelves filled with his books, the desk he built. "Tell them, if there is anything they like, they are welcome to keep it. The rest, they can donate to charity. A housewarming gift from me." "That's very generous of you, Mrs. Thompson." I hung up, feeling a final pang of letting go. It was the last real tie, the final release of the past. I wasn't being generous. I was setting myself free. One day, returning from the market, I saw a moving truck parked in front of the apartment building, a truck from a storage company. 2 men were hauling boxes into the lobby. I saw the names scrawled on the side, Chloe and Mark. They must have finally come for their things, their lease on their luxury condo presumably up. I walked past them quietly, my head down, my hat pulled low. I didn't want a confrontation, didn't want false apologies or angry accusations. My chapter in their lives was over. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Chloe and Mark in my old living room replayed in my mind. My daughter's screams, my son-in-law's furious face. Had I done the right thing? The question rose up in the darkness, a haunting specter. I got out of bed and picked up Arthur's photo. I stared into his eyes, searching for an answer, for absolution, for simple understanding. "You always said I was too kind," I whispered to the photograph. "You warned me not to give her so much that she forgot to be grateful." Failed. My love. I loved her into a poison. I clutched the frame, a wave of guilt washing over me. Was I a failed mother? To have raised such a selfish, ungrateful child? But then, Arthur's voice echoed in my memory, as clear as if he were standing there. "Promise me you'll look after yourself." I hadn't failed. I was keeping my promise. I was looking after myself, protecting myself from the very people who should have been protecting me. I placed the frame back on the table, a calm settling back over my heart. I may have lost a daughter, but I had found myself. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable thing of all. A month passed. My new life settled into a comfortable routine. I had not heard from Chloe or Mark, and I made no effort to reach out. I knew they must be struggling, but their problems were not my own. I had given them the hardest lesson, and now they had to learn to stand on their own. One day, while I was reading at the coffee shop, Sky came over with her tablet. "Eleanor, you have to see this. It's going viral all over Austin." She handed me the tablet. On the screen was a post from a Facebook group called True Austin Stories. The headline read, "A cautionary tale for the kids, when a liability fights back." My heart pounded as I began to read the story, written by an anonymous user. It told of an elderly widow whose daughter and son-in-law planned to put her in a home to sell her house. It detailed the woman's pain and betrayal upon overhearing their cruel plan on a forgotten phone call. Told how, instead of succumbing to her fate, the woman rose up, quietly sold the house from under them, kept the money, and left only a letter to teach her ungrateful children a lesson. The story was powerfully and emotionally written. It named no names and no specific locations, but every detail was chillingly accurate, from the word liability to the dream house in the hill country. Beneath the post were thousands of comments. Serves those kids right. One person wrote, "Go Grandma," an inspiration for every senior being taken for granted. Wrote another, "This is a real problem in our society. So sad when greed replaces gratitude." I scrolled through the comments with a shaking hand. Who wrote this? I asked Sky, my voice barely a whisper. No idea. It's an anonymous account, but it's been shared tens of thousands of times. Everyone is talking about it. I handed the tablet back to Sky, my mind reeling. Someone knew my story and had put it out into the world. My first feeling was fear, a sense of violation. But then a second feeling replaced it, a sense of validation. I was not alone. My story had resonated, striking a chord with countless others who had faced similar fates. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a long moment before answering. Hello? Mom, is that you? The voice. I knew it instantly, though it was hoarse and broken with pain. Chloe's voice. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Mom, I'm so sorry. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry for everything. I was stupid. I was awful. I'm so sorry. Her sobs came through the line. Mark, he left me. After the money was gone. After the house was gone. He said I was dragging him down. And he just left. A heavy silence fell between us, punctuated only by Chloe's crying. I have no one now. Mom, I'm in a tiny little apartment, working at a convenience store to pay the rent. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to tell you I was sorry. I closed my eyes, an image of a young Chloe flashing in my mind, the little girl who used to tell me I was the best mother in the world. The anger I had harbored for so long had burned itself out, leaving only the ashes of pain and complicated love. Where are you? I finally asked, my voice steadier than I expected. She sobbed and gave me her address. A rundown apartment complex in a far-flung part of the city. Take care of yourself, I said softly, before hanging up. I made no promises to visit, no promises of forgiveness, no promises at all. But I knew, that night, that my story was not over. Forgiveness is not a simple thing, especially when the wounds run so deep. But letting bitterness consume a life is not a solution either. The next morning, I went to the bank and withdrew a sum of cash. Not a large amount, but enough to help someone get a fresh start. I put it in a plain white envelope, wrote no note, and sent it via courier to Chloe's address. It was not a reconciliation. It might not even have been forgiveness. It was the act of a mother who, despite everything, could not completely sever the cord. I didn't know what the future held, or if Chloe and I would ever truly speak again. But I knew I had chosen my path, one of healing and of letting go. I returned to my quiet life, but it now held a new dimension. My story, shared online, had become a voice of warning for a society, a beacon for other seniors who felt alone and worthless. I may have started this journey in pain and revenge, but in the end, I had found something more. I had found my own strength, the capacity for a new beginning, and the peace that comes from forgiving not for anyone else, but for myself. I looked at Arthur's picture on my nightstand and smiled. A real unburdened smile for the first time in years. I did it, my love. I whispered. I looked after myself. And now, I'm ready to live. My story did not end in tragedy. It ended in hope. It ended with the realization that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a light, if only you are brave enough to walk toward it.